Batu, Barada, Nikto. You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive!
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space Patreon bonuses. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
Julian Darius reporting for duty, ready to weather out the storm here in Australia.
Yes, we are back, and we're doing a remake. We don't do these very often, but we're doing a remake of what we covered on the main feed. We covered On the Beach from 1959, which was in turn based on a 1957 book. But now we are doing the joint effort between American production company and Australian production company. On the Beach 2000 TV movie, or better described as a two-part event. I know they have these things that sort of happen. It and Stephen King's entire filmography, pretty much for a point. These two episodes sort of event things, running at 3 hours and 15 minutes. Found on YouTube. Did you watch it on the link I sent?
Yeah,
really good quality. I was quite impressed.
Yeah,
very good quality.
I thought so too.
Starring Armand Asante, Rachel Ward, Brian Brown, Jacqueline McKenzie, and then beyond that, kind of other people. They're the main four. Much like exactly the same as the previous one, after a global nuclear war, the residents of Australia must come to terms with the fact that all life will be destroyed in a matter of months. But an American submarine is going to be sent north to investigate whether or not, in this case, the nuclear fallout has declined in certain parts of the north, under the belief that someone is out there and trying to send a message.
That's similar to the original.
It is. I think it was mainly around the message in the original, wasn't it? But they have the whole thing of this misinformation.
The signal from San Francisco.
Well, they have the signal. Well, no, it's from Anchorage in this one, isn't it?
In this one, it's from Anchorage.
Yeah, but in this one, they also have this misinformation around a hole that may or may not have been blown in the ozone, which will be helping to ventilate the radiation into space, kind of thing. So the north should be better than it is, and there's a hope. There's a whole thing around hope in this, which is kind of interesting. Let's talk about this film. Let's say there's a lot in this. Sort of, we've talked before, but this is a different sort of kind of take on it, I feel. The advertising for this was a lot more focused around the love triangle. It tries to focus on this kind of as a romance kind of thing between Armand Asante's Commander Dwight Towers, Rachel Ward's Moira Davidson, and then Brian Brown as Dr. Julian Osborne. This kind of love triangle kind of thing that's sort of going on, which is there, but actually it's one plot really of many. But the main plot is definitely the nuclear winter and all that kind of stuff. But how do you feel about this version in comparison to the version we watched before?
I have a suspicion you like it more than I do. I think that I'm interested in all the changes that they make. I think all of that is interesting to talk about. I think that there aren't a ton of changes.
No.
But the changes are, and of course, it has a lot of extra runtime. I think the changes are interesting. I think there's, I think some of them, I think in general, the changes don't work. The additions tend to work or be interesting or else unnecessary completely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's stuff that I like about this, and I think that I did find myself thinking I like a solid remake. I was thinking, we should do an episode of 20th Century Geek that's just called, in favor of remakes and spoilers. Um, because, let's be clear, if you've ever watched a production of Shakespeare or an ancient Greek play, everyone knows how it ends.
Yes.
Spoilers, Hamlet dies at the end, right? You know that. You cannot be you cannot ever watch any of that stuff if you are in this culture, this bizarre culture of no remakes, no spoilers. And if any movie deserves a remake, it's this one. I'm such a huge defender and fan of that first film. Having said that, I think the thing that is weakest here are the performances,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in my mind. What were your general impressions?
No, it was yeah. I agree with what you're saying. I think one of the problems that this suffers from um is the fact that it's a two-part TV event, mini-series event. It's not it's a TV movie-ish. Um, and so it has a runtime dictated by by television scheduling rather than storytelling. And that becomes evident, I think, throughout where they're sort of like, you have an hour and a half to fill for night one and an hour and a half to fill for night two. And so you're right in that there's an awful lot in both halves. Not an awful lot, but there are definite scenes where you're like, oh, this is filler. This scene's going on too long. This is filler. So there is bits where I am just like, um, you know, you can tell, well, even like the writers have sort of gone, oh, look, let's just extend this bit, or we're going to have a scene that if this was filmed for a movie would end up on the cutting room floor. Like for example, there's a scene before they get sent off, before the submarine is going to get sent off, where two guys don't turn up on time. When they're sort of dragged to the ship, the Commander Towers, Amanda Sante, sort of says, well, basically get off, and has it sort of like gives them a dressing down and sends them off on their way. And I get why it's there to show that some people are sort of like, there's the breakdown of command and all this other stuff. But it kind of serves no purpose because no one else does it on the submarine. So I'm like, okay, that's a scene that like is there to fill time. It doesn't serve any real purpose. That's one example. There's several others. However, because of the longer runtime, and again, I think some of the performances are weaker. Um, I think the longer runtime though made me sort of settle in with some of the characters more so than I did with the TV film, especially I
More
like
so than the regular film.
yes, more so than the
Yeah.
59 version. Now again, I said I like the 59 version. I liked it. I think two of the problems I had with that kind of addressed here, um, just by nature of the runtime and them having to fill time, is I feel much more attached to there's Grant Bowler playing Lieutenant Peter Holmes, but to the relationship between him and his wife and the daughter. I feel much more attachment to that whole sort of like home life and the family life. Again, it's a bit like with the day after tomorrow, where it's about, or the day after, sorry, where it's about, um, you get to know the character. So when it comes to that inevitable ending, I feel much more the tragedy of them having to sort of the suicide at the end of the film. I thought that I thought the 59 version is good with Anthony Perkins and it sort of works, but this one felt much more of a gut punch, mainly because I'd seen the wife Mary go through this whole sort of like almost delusional hope of, no, I've heard about this, that the North is going to be fine, and that so and so said this, and there's almost like this disinformation or there's almost fake news about what's happening and that the government's lying or other stuff. So there's that. um I think that worked better for me in that sense because I was more attached to them, or I felt more of a pang for it. um I think the other thing again is there's this dread that just sort of grows with this, and I think it starts with one thing that I think was missing from that 59 version is there's clearly a sense from the Australians in particular of, oh, the Americans did
Mm.
this,
Mm-hmm.
And so you see that in a number of occasions where people are like, even say to Commander Towers like you don't go out in that uniform, or good luck if you do go out in that uniform, or you get spat at in the street, or there's like other moments where like people in Americans get called out for like you did this because it's America versus China and all this other stuff, and they try to justify it. I feel much more with the 59 version. There's almost like a tally ho, we're all in this
Hmm.
together kind of ness, where this is like,
Hmm.
no, 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 you did this to us and we're having to sort of sort out the consequences kind of thing, which I really kind of felt much more real in that sense.
Yeah, I like that too, and that sort of comes back in the sort of subplot about whether Tower really did fire,
Mm,
the nuclear weapons. And I think all of that stuff works. All of that stuff is a welcome addition. I think it might also reflect a generational divide that especially post World War II, where Australia was very allied with the United States and really integrated intelligence services and things like that. Um, that's very different from, late 2000 sort of period.
oh yeah,
Um, so where, I mean, Australia is in the middle of a realignment toward Asia. Uh, so you know, I think it reflects that. But I think all that stuff was well done. I think that
mm,
stuff is a welcome addition. I did not find all that stuff with the wife and the character and their kid compelling. I thought, I agree with you that the 59 original, some of the characters are sort of broadly sketched and can have a kind of like cardboard quality. Um, some of that is the runtime, some of that is the era, right?
yes,
Where there is, especially men are not granted a lot of interiority.
yeah,
Um, and here there's more of that. I think that's welcome. For example, when Tower stays with his friend who's dying of radiation poisoning, I thought that stuff was,
mm,
maybe drawn out, but good and interesting. Um, but I think basically everything with families is terrible to me in this movie. Like it's all a cliche. It's all a series of scenes that are meant to, depict how loving family life is. But, outside of the wife working on the house, which I like and kind of like getting it perfect, I like that stuff.
mm,
But
mm.
every scene between them, I just feels like a cliche to me. I think the Anthony Perkins character is far more interesting to me. And
No,
all of these incessant flashbacks,
yes,
are just horrible. Um,
that I'll grant you. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, they start to they this whole thing with like Armando Santos Commander Towers, whether he is hallucinating or delusional, like the thing of him seeing, um, I hate this in films. I always did. This has been a bugbear for years for me. Is when someone will look
Every
at
time
some,
he sees a crib, he has a flashback to his child. Every
yeah,
time he sees,
but not just
a
that,
photo of a family together.
but not just like a flashback. It's not just where it goes like, oh, I have a memory of this. It's like a full blown delusion. Like
I
he's
know.
interacting with it. He thinks he's stroking some kid's head, or he's sort of like he's responding to questions that the memory has asked. I hate this in films. I always detest this in films. I think it's such a cheap sort of trick of going, I was lost in the memories. And I'm like, no, no, no. If you're responding to something that vividly, then that's not a flashback.
You're psychotic.
You're like, yeah, you've
You
got
should
some,
not be
you,
commanding a submarine.
yeah, exactly. And so yeah, I agree. Those flashbacks are badly done. They're kind of messy. Um, the thing is, you're right. This is overly dramatic as well. I think one of the things we should, I would agree with. I like the family stuff. I think it is a little over dramatic in places. Like it's heavily done, where there is kind of like we're a happy family, and he's got to get home to his wife and kid and all this other stuff. It's a little much, but it kind of works for me. I think it works for what they're trying to deliver. However, I do think there's a lot of tropes or cliches in this that kind of grate on me as well. The wife and her sister Rachel being, sorry, Rachel Moira and Mary being like, we're sisters, but we're totally the opposite. Like one's mousy and one's a party girl, and like da da da. Like, all that stuff is so sort of CW level kind of bullshit. I'm a bit like, okay, like I know it's kind of there in the book and in the original film, but like you've gone to the extremes with this one where it feels. I don't know. It feels like a soap. It's a soap opera, isn't it? I mean, that's the
Yeah.
soap opera element, and it kind of doesn't always work.
I think their
Um,
conversation about it, where it's really overt, is good.
yes, later
You
on,
know, right, where, they basically talk about each being kind of jealous of each other, you know, one, uh, lived in the shadow of Moira.
yes,
And, Moira is like, well, you have a family, you have these things that I don't. So I like that conversation. And Moira is, I think, a far more fleshed out, interesting character here than in
yes,
the 59 version. But I'm with you on the sort of soap opera, the family stuff, the melodrama. And I have to say, it's more than just the family stuff, because every time characters express emotion, it's like a realistic movie shifts into like a cliched soap opera. And it's true even on the ship. And I have to say, the worst performance is Asante. You know, he cannot emote to save his life. And he's fine as long as he has to look stoic. But every time, even on the ship where he's disciplining somebody, it's like, are you in do you think you're in Under Siege? Like, what sort of exaggerated nonsense is this?
yeah,
Even when he's like, oh, we're gonna party tonight, it feels like he's like
threatening
shifted
people.
it. Yeah, I mean, it's very bizarre. Yeah, and so
I'm on
I think
Sante is one of
everything is
those.
sort of heightened.
Yeah, he's one of these odd. He's one of these actors that I haven't come across massively. Like my main experience, my main thought for him is Judge Dredd, the 1995 Judge Dredd, where he plays Rico, and he is massively over the top in that film. Like he is swinging for all the fences and eating all the scenery in that film. Um, and so that's sort of my expectation of him. And even in that, like you say, he's not emoting. He just shouts like he's gone to the older school Pacino sort of film of acting of just sort of like, if I go big, like I'm a villain kind of thing. Um, he is of all the cast, I think he is the most miscast. I
Mhm.
agree. Um, and he would work in a submarine film if it was like Das Boot, or you know what I mean? Like I can see him doing a military U-boat film, like a submarine film, but like yeah, but when he's got to emote and he's got to have those moments with Moira, it kind of feels wooden and it doesn't always work. Um, I just think he always comes across like he's about to punch someone. That's always the way I feel. Like I'm not entirely sure he's happy and he's not about to just punch someone out.
Yeah, it's telling that the scenes that I find most convincing with him are like when he's washing dishes or he's on the dock with Moira and there's no dialogue and it's just cutting forward in time, doing time lapse stuff. That stuff's great.
Mm.
Um, but anytime that he's got dialogue in a scene, whether it's dressing somebody down, celebrating, expressing, love, expressing concern for his family, it's painfully bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
even when he says that he had to stay, like when he says he's gotten over his family, he doesn't say he's gotten over his family.
Yeah.
He says, this is at the end, and he just says, "I realize they're dead now," and like the most unconvincing manner possible. It's like,
Like Patrick
well, you
Bateman.
realize that already.
That's it. Like Patrick Bateman pretending to be sort of like emotionally attached to people. I think I know that they are dead now, and so I
Yeah,
can move on. And everyone's going, "Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that." You need
yeah,
the Commander Towers role is you need someone who has, and I think this was I can't remember who it was in the 59 version. I'll have to have a quick look, but basically they have a oh, it's Gregory Peck. Yeah,
yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
right.
and he's perfect in that role of like he has a charisma and a sort of a presence as being a person in command, but also um you know, he has a warmth and a sort of like a fun side that I think comes through. And I think he was a much better Towers
Mm.
than Armand Sante.
And he can be
Um,
reserved, but you sort of feel like there is an interiority of emotion within him,
yes,
right?
yeah,
Um, Whereas Asante sort of has two modes, like stoic slash reserved, where occasionally there's a glimpse of some emotion within, but sometimes he's go just performing actions like a marionette. And then he's got the second mode is
shout.
massively
Yeah.
overblown, anger,
Well, there's a scene.
usually.
There's a scene in the first half where I think it's the first. It is the first half. They take out the Dr. Julian Osborne's Ferrari, and they're out.
Mhm.
You know, so Dwight and Towers and Moira are out for this sort of date thing, and they're taking the car, and they get almost in a crash, and there's another car sat overlooking the edge of this thing, and eventually it's a family. You see, it's a family, and then the dad of the family just drives them off the edge of this cliff, and it's that was kind of not that bit with the car going over. If you watch it, like there's clearly
Yeah.
dummies, clearly dummies, but you see shit bouncing around inside that car, and then it
Oh
gets
yeah.
smashed. And there's no explosion, there's no grand boom Hollywood thing. Like that car just gets messed up. That kind of bothered me. Like watching, I was like, oh, that's and but his response to it, there's a phrase where he's like,
Mm,
they didn't know that there's potentially hope, and I was like, that's really important.
right.
But then it has this moment where it sort of zooms on his face, but then they have like time lapse clouds and stuff going over his head in the
Yeah.
background, and I was like, I don't
As he
know.
screams, Jesus, Jesus,
Yeah,
Jesus.
and
And
it
like
goes
his
on and
only
on.
reaction is to say, "Oh Jesus, Jesus Christ,
Yeah,
Jesus," over and over again. That time lapse cloud shit. It's really horrible there.
I was really confused because I was just like, I don't know what this means. Is that isn't the state of his mind? Is it racing? Like I don't
Hmm.
know. Like I'm trying to read something into this. Um. So yeah, no, it's an odd one. There's some odd choices made when it comes to Armando Sante's actions in this
Well,
film.
and I think that scene is an illustration of another thing that I find interesting, which is that there are certain shots, such as that car's destruction just before it, and other shots where I think, oh, this is well done. This
Mm.
looks expensive. This is well directed. There's some shots that, I mean, some of the sub, like where they're not skimping. And where I mean, there's a helicopter later on for what it's worth, not very much, but you know, there are bits where I think this is really surprisingly well done. And then you have those flashbacks, which are just amateur hour, and then you have the Jesus time lapse thing, and sometimes they're juxtaposed right next to each other, and I'm like, this
It's
one is a really excellent TV movie that is going for cinema quality. The very next scene is like everything that's wrong with TV movies.
yes, no, I do agree. I'm just looking to the. We should highlight that this was directed by Russell Mulcahy, who I know best for Highlander,
Hmm.
the first Highlander, and he has done. You know, I'm just looking at he comes from music videos, as do many sort of directors of that time. But yeah, he did like um, Highlander. Unfortunately, Highlander 2. uh, yeah, he's got one of those directors, the Real McCoy. Oh, that's a film I haven't thought about in a long time. The Shadow, um, Silent Trigger. So he started doing videos and then sort of slipped into TV around this time when he starts to sort of starts to do a lot of TV movies and TV series and stuff. And so this is clearly a swing point for him in his career. But you can see, I still think you can tell this is a little bit like Nicholas Meyer doing the day after, where you go, oh, you're on a TV budget and you've got certain constraints, but you've clearly got experience of how to work in the Hollywood structure and how to do things. And I think you're right, it does come through, and there are certain scenes, especially again on that sub. There are certain scenes on that sub that are filmed. I'm like, oh, this is set up brilliantly. Like I like, this really works for me. And you're right. Then you'll have another scene where you're like, huh, this is done. This must be directed by somebody else because this is like the exact opposite. Um, yeah, and again, like this has got. We'll talk about budget restraints that kind of make me laugh, but
Yeah,
like
I mean, I think like the radiation poisoning, all those people vomiting on the sub and stuff, that's all done very well.
yes.
Clearly it seems like it's shot on a real submarine.
Oh,
Um,
this
you know,
feels claustrophobic. When they're on the sub,
yeah.
it feels claustrophobic, and I like that. They're like, this isn't kind of playing for like Hunt for Red October where they're going to go, we've got these big areas and it's all dramatically lit. They're like, no, this is a functional area and it's cramped and it's not,
Hmm.
this is not a nice place to be. Um, and
Well,
the thought,
and I go ahead.
I was, no, this thing, I get it when people, whenever the crew or other people are like, you're on this for a month. And they're like, yeah, that's not good. And I'm like, no, it doesn't feel good. Like, this is the first time I'm watching a submarine film and going, like, this really doesn't feel like a nice, not that I think it's ever been a nice place, but this is the first time I'm like, oh, you are so on top of each other. This is
Mhm.
not a good place to be. So,
Yeah, and that's the way it should be, right? As
yeah.
opposed to
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah.
in the Navy,
Yeah, yeah.
you know. Um, yeah, the even that like dressing down scene that you mentioned as those two guys,
Mm,
were cavorting with girls and are late to the sub leaving. That you're right doesn't really have a lot of import. I like that they do that scene because I also see like, oh, okay, well, it's not just that, you know, uh the hierarchy is broken down. It's also like not everybody is on board with shipping out, right? Not,
yeah.
their priorities. People are gonna have different responses. So I like the idea. But then Asante shifts into his dressing down mode. And so you have like three lines of dialogue to like, I mean, I had to rewind it to say, why is he mad at them again? Oh yeah, because there's like a few lines of dialogue and then he shifts into yelling mode.
Hmm.
And it's just embarrassingly comical as he's yelling at them.
Yeah.
And then we're right back into, the submarine. Um, yeah, so I mean, the difference is for me, um, I think that the day after um, feels more low budget. Obviously, it's very constrained. I mean, it's reusing every bit of footage
Yeah.
of a missile that's ever been found. But damn if but Meyer knows characters,
Hmm.
and we often talking about that how like a lot of the dialogue isn't great, the script isn't great, but it's just working at like 140% of its material, and so much of
Mm,
that is down to just the performances and those characters. This one is sort of the opposite, where um, really outside of I'd say Moira's pretty good. Julian is sort of middling,
oh, I really
to sort
like
of
Brian Brown.
okay.
I really like Brian
Uh,
Brown in this, and yeah, Dr. Julian Osborne. I
Everyone else is kind of in some other movie to me.
well, I think they're all in different movies. They're all in a different film. They just happen to be on the same set. I think that's one of the things about this. The only times I feel that it really coalesces is on the submarines. Like it truly coalesces. I like some of the stuff with the families, and there's other bits I enjoy. Um, but truly, I think this really sort of comes together when it's on the submarine, and there's a sort of like they're like, oh, we know what the tone is.
Mm,
Like I get it. I know what the tone. From the moment they sort of they have to ship out, they sort of settle on a tone that I think has struck. So the first 40 minutes of this, they endlessly struggle. And I think the problem is like Brian Brown, who I like, is an actor that I know from predominantly I've known him from two films called FX and FX2, which is kind of like
hmm.
a cop, action comedy kind of thing from the sort of around
I
this time
remember
actually.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good. And he's an Australian actor. He's doing a bunch of other stuff, pops up in things every now and then. But I like him. He's got good presence. But he's that kind of like snarky, don't care kind of attitude, and he's playing that here. Like that's exactly what they've brought him in to do. So I like this version. He was played by Fred Astaire in '59, and he was a lot more sort of like playing a doctor or a professor. He was a bit more sort of controlled. But I like the fact they've brought him in to be a contrast to towers and that sort of
Hmm.
thing. But the thing is, he clearly thinks at the beginning, he's like, oh, I'm playing in a sort of a dramedy. Like this has got some comedy in it. Like I should be bringing that. And then he sort of like stops that to a little bit, and then he's like, "Oh no, this is more serious. I've got to play it like the tragedy and the snarkiness and the sort of like despair of it." And when he settles into that, it feels he sort of feels much more in line with everybody else. And I feel that like the same I'd say for Rachel Ward as Moira. The first again the whole this when she's first introduced and they have this whole thing where she meets Commander Towers on the train, and then they all get together in the family and they go on the boats, they go out sailing and all that sort of stuff. She is grating the shit out of me. Like I'm
Yeah.
going like I can't watch this woman for 3 hours. Like I can't do it. I was really struggling with it at this point where I'm like, this is all melodramatic. She's doing this kind of like waving her arms and her legs around. It's really grating on me. I don't know why anyone would fall in love with them in this way. I know where this film's going because I've seen the others. I don't know why anyone would. And then all of a sudden, like she settles down as well around the
Hmm.
same time, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of this seems to have sank in to people. Like I think they were trying to what they were trying to do was like a high followed by a low, but like that first half hour, 40 minutes is all over the place in tone, and that's the hardest part for me is the opening of this film. Um, and then it settles into a pace, and for the rest of it, I'm kind of good beyond that.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. I mean, I think that once they ship out in the submarine,
Mm,
it gets better. For me,
mm,
the whole second half is better.
yeah,
Um, sort of part two, where it starts with them on the sub going to Alaska, is a lot better.
mm,
I think that tone on the sub is, largely good. It largely works. And then so much of the story is just going home to die, right?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And, that stuff I get a lot of problems with, especially the changes, but it is just the narrative punch
Mm.
of the end of this movie, that works so well on the original.
I want to get to the
It's
sort
bad.
of.
It's hard to fuck up too bad.
Oh yeah, no, because I think yeah. Um, I do want to get. I have a question. That I'm curious about. We've talked about spoilers and remakes and stuff, and I want to get to that in a second. But there is a scene where I laughed out loud unintentionally, or at least I chuckled quite much. And that scene was, and this was where I think the budget was fully on display. Because again, I think some of the special effects in this, I think this is early computer effects, but they keep it to a minimum. I think the submarine underwater looks fine. There's nothing egregious where I'm like, even when they show San Francisco like blasted later in the film, and there's some clear evidence of CGI and stuff. None of it is egregious enough that I'm going, that's terrible, and I'm being taken out. It's good enough that I'm like, I know there's a special effect, but it's good enough that I'm going to let it pass for a TV film.
Yeah.
All right, fine with it, doesn't bother me. However, when they go into Alaska and it's clearly evident that they've used foam that is melting like mad to
Oh,
act as
yes.
snow, I was laughing. I'm sorry. There's a scene where they're struggling to look around, and the front of a car, there's like foam
Yes.
bubbles running down the truck,
Yeah, that
running
is
down the
bad.
headlights, dripping off. It's coming off the houses. It's bad. Like that is
Yeah.
bad decision.
Oh, yeah. That was really bad. Everything is dripping,
Yeah,
uh
it's
and
really bad.
it made me think, like, you were laughing and I was thinking, is this some nuclear fallout mixed with the snow? Like, this looks like some kind of like white slime. Like, did Godzilla come and jizz all over this car? Like, what's going on here? I
I
mean,
was
I'm thinking about that shit.
Yeah, no, I was waiting for them to acknowledge it. Like I was like,
Yes.
oh, there's going to be a justification for this. Like someone's going to say they've covered these things in foam. This was clearly like they think this was going to protect them from radiation. They just ignore it and they
The
walk
snow was
on.
melting,
Yeah,
due
yeah.
to the climate change or something. I mean,
It's
the
never
winds
it's never
changing.
it's never
Yeah.
acknowledged. It's just foam and it looks really funny. So that
Even
ruined.
that house that he goes into and sees the dead bodies, like that house looks like
It's covered in bubbles.
yeah, it is, and everything kind of has this sort of like plastery, sort of like wet plaster look to it, where it like distorts uh
Hmm.
the shape of the house in weird ways, and it just looks all bubbly and pudgy and weird and
Yeah.
dripping, like you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. No, that whole bit in that when they go into the houses and stuff, like I thought the same. I was like, this is when he goes in the house, I'm like, this is clearly a set that they've thrown together at the last minute. This is not a house. This looks like a set. It looks like a bad set. You know, it's one of the least convincing. It's the most disappointing part. However, it does lead me on to the question I wanted to ask. So they go to Alaska to that. This is the message that they've been receiving, and it's coming through at irregular moments or irregular times, and it's distorted. There's a video file, and then there is a. Also, I love listening to early 2000s technology. Trying to pretend it's futuristic is also hilarious. It's over a megabyte, and I'm like, and it's like, wow, that must be quite a long video then to be over a megabyte of it. And they're like, and it's not. It's about 20 seconds. Um, and there's a text file, and they get this thing, and the first one is "Don't despair," and then it sort of says about saving the whales and all this other stuff. And so they
The
put this.
whales have survived.
The whales have survived, and I love the reaction where they're like, "Why are they telling us about whales?" And Julian, Dr. Osborne's like, "Oh, maybe they're going to tell us about the lesser spotted Antarctic duck next." Like there's like he knows there's something wrong with that throughout all this, but they then find that it's this woman that was an Australian, and she was planted. She was there to report on a news story about some whales that had been caught in the ice floes but had now been freed, and so on and so forth. So she's a reporter, and you see this news footage that she had shot at the moment when it is declared that nuclear bombs have been dropped on the United States. And that scene of her reacting to that is kind of interesting. And you find out that she stayed behind to try and she knew that it was all over, and she was trying to send this message. And the message is this whole thing about her is the news clip basically, and this thing of don't despair, the whales have survived, and they are out there. Da, da, da. But
It's a stupid like color story
it is
that
basically it's
she was
fluff, isn't it?
reporting
Yes.
as the news of the bombs.
Yeah. And the reason she's trying to send it is because her husband or boyfriend in Melbourne is Simon. She wants to say I love you, and that's at the end of this message before she signs out. That's the point of it. But it's this on the laptop that she's trying to send it from, this sort of satcom thing. There is a solar panel on the laptop which is being powered, and every time the sun rises, it comes through this window, and for a short time, as the sun passes over this window, it lights up this solar panel and charges up the laptop enough for it to be able to, or it triggers the laptop for it to try and send this message, but it's not enough, so it corrupts the file and stuff. It makes reference to the Coca-Cola bottle throughout that, because obviously back to the 59 and to the original story. But one of the points I wanted to make is, and we'll talk because that's the changes. I want to ask you about the change. But one of the points I was thinking about as I watched this, you and I obviously watched the 59 version, okay, and we both enjoyed it, but it laid it out. I've not read the 57 book. I don't think the 57 book is hugely well known. I don't think the 59 film is hugely well known within certain audiences. If you were coming to this, so there's two senses for this. Me watching this, knowing where it's going, because I already know the story. I'm coming out from this point of how are they going to play out the increasing dread and the tragedy that's going to result in the ending of this. Okay, so how is that going to play out? I know the event of these characters. I want to see how they react to it. Da, 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 right? I know this thing's a false alarm. I know all this other stuff, right? So it's more about how the characters end up at the end of the film for me and the journey you go on to that point. So that's you and I come into it that way. If, however, you came into this in 2000 and this is the first time you'd seen this thing and you knew nothing about it, and your expectation, I don't know, do you come in with potentially an expectation of, oh, I know every disaster film and apocalypse film usually has that heroic ending where it's all going to turn out well, and you know, Tale of Two Earths and all these other things that we've watched, you know, sort of these films where we're going to go off into space and it'll be fine, or there's going to be a breakthrough, or there's an island with Kevin Costner living on it as an Aquaman kind of thing. Like there'll be something.
2012, there's an
2012,
arc that's gonna save some people.
exactly. Like we are almost trained to believe that there's going to be a last minute save. All right, bunkers, whatever. Okay. Do you think this plays out for a first time viewer with surprises? Are these twists and reveals shocking, and does it lead to a tragic ending? Or I don't know. I was just thinking about it as I was watching it. I think, well, I know where this goes, and I'm kind of enjoying this, but knowing where these characters are going to end up. But like, there's this talk of radiation escaping through the atmosphere into space and it being better. I don't know. How do you think this works for new viewers?
I think this would work. I mean, I think especially, I think this would largely work.
Mm.
Um, I think that it does a good job of exactly those things. And like you said, I think we're trained to expect that kind of hope, right? That kind of
Yes.
some kind of salvation or limited salvation. Um, I think that the transmission, although, Julian is suspicious,
Hmm.
I think that that largely works. I think that if anything, they play up the disappointment more here than in the original. So I would think that that would come across,
Mm.
Um, and they go home and, as they leave, you're watching the sub crew get sick, which we didn't see. I think the distribution of the suicide pills and stuff and the religious aspect is lessened here than in
Yes.
59, and I think that's a disappointment. On the other hand, and I think the way they die is disappointing to me here, but I do think, like especially watching them get sick, and I think that Asante's speech to the crew about like he says I'm agnostic, but if there is some God, let all of humans have lived for some purpose.
Mm.
I think that's a great addition.
Mm.
Um, so I would think that it largely works, in my mind.
Mm.
I want to return to the PC, but do you think it largely works for a new viewer?
Yes, I do. And that was my thinking as I was going along, was like, say, does this work? Is there any point where like it overplays its hand in any sort of sense? Um, and I don't think it does. And I don't think it's pacing. I just think it's kind of it almost has like bullet points, doesn't it? There's certain points in the film where you go like, this is the information that's released, but it never kind of goes the full. And not until the visit to Alaska, and then they see San Francisco, and you're kind of like, oh no, they're done. Like, now you're just kind of like, how does it end? But I think it keeps allowing you to build up hope. Like you can choose, because the whole sort of first part of the film is this kind of thing between hope and cynicism. Like, Dr. Osborne is routinely called out for being a cynic, as is Lieutenant Holmes, who is Mary's husband and stuff. She's the one that's like, no, you have to hope, you have to have faith. Like there is a possibility. Like this could. I've heard that the wind things have changed in the north and it's going to be blown somewhere else and we're going to survive and there's always this hope, and her hope is for her and her daughter, for her family. But I think you know she's looking at her daughter and be like, I can't kill or see my daughter injured or hurt. But there is this constant thing of going like, you have to be real, like you have to be practical. And I think like from Lieutenant Holmes's kind of position, he's like, look, I've seen the data on
Mhm.
present at the Admiralty. Like I can see what's happening, and these northerly winds aren't there. But then to Dr. Osborne's point, he's like, I'm a mathematician. The numbers keep telling me the same thing.
Mhm.
Like I'm not seeing a variance, and he says I acknowledge there's something weird going on, but the numbers are telling me something different. Like and that's his point. And so there is this kind of thing I thought that's interesting as a first time viewer. They're almost saying to you, are you in team hope or are you in team cynic? Like you can
Yeah.
choose a track to follow for this for at least two-thirds of the film, which I kind of liked, and then it's going to give you the answer at the end. But no, I thought I did. I think this would work for a first-time viewer, and I think that it works well. And I can imagine some of the reviews or some of the viewers being a bit like, especially because part one ends on them receiving the message and deciphering it, and ends with them saying, "Don't despair."
Hmm.
So the first bit ends on a hopeful note, like they're heading to the north. They've identified that the rads are still high, but lesser than they expect. And they have this message of "Don't despair." And I was like, "Oh, you are going to get a kick in the nuts when you watch the next bit."
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think this is a good point you're highlighting. And I think that this movie does a better job than the original in
Hmm.
sort of setting up that dynamic.
Mm.
Like, which team are you on kind of thing. Um, there's more with Julian being a cynic, in this. Um, and it's less clear from the get-go who's right in that relationship between
Yeah.
the husband and the wife. I love how the wife's cynicism or the wife's hopefulness is based on sort of fake news and sort
Yes.
of like don't
Yeah.
trust the experts. I mean, this is ahead of its time.
Oh,
Yeah, in
yeah.
that regard. I mean, this is like 2000. I mean, the internet is relatively new.
Yeah.
And here's this woman saying, well, I read this and I'm thinking this is just like QAnon, where it's like, trust me, I'm a highly placed Pentagon person telling you that this is all bullshit, right?
I
Um,
love there's a
Obviously it's bullshit, but
yeah. There's a
yeah.
great dinner. There's a scene where they've had people over for dinner, and Dr. Osborne sort of crashes the party, and they're having this conversation. And Mary has been saying like exactly that. I read this thing about these winds in the north, and there's another person there saying, "Yeah, I saw this. This person said that actually the level of rads is a lot lower than is expected." And he bursts in saying like, "Who? Who said that? When did they say it? And this is like the scientist, and he's saying like, look, all right, tell me when I can reference it. Like, and the guy's like, oh, it was just someone he looked, and he says he looked like he knew what he was doing,
This
and
is me in every conversation these
yeah,
days. I
yeah,
mean, this is like I am the worst friend. I am
yeah,
always, like telling my friends like, right, well, some people say I'm like, who,
yeah,
right? Give me the citation. What were their credentials? Where did you read this at? Well, I heard it. Oh, okay.
yeah.
Right. Well, I heard that little green men are secretly controlling the government. What about it? I'm merciless.
Yeah,
I'm a far less kind
yeah,
than this guy is.
yeah. Well, no,
But
no,
this is the world we live in now.
yeah,
I mean,
I do think it highlights that thing of not listening to experts because I like his thing where he sort of references some award. He's like, "You ever heard of this award?" No, it's the Nobel Prize for mathematics, and he's like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "I have one." Like he's like, I'm
hmm
the top of my field. I kind of know what I'm talking about. So no, this was definitely ahead of its time, but I think in doing so, it definitely calls out this thing of you know, I suppose it does a little bit with the religion. It's less leans into it less than the 59 one, but this idea
yeah.
of do we fabricate things to generate hope? What is hope? What is and a Towers does it later in the film. This thing about morale is like no, there are certain things they don't need to know right now. Like he won't do a radiation reading at certain points because he's like because we've got 2 days left before we get to Alaska. I'm not destroying morale now just to feed your ego. Like I need these people ready to work and stuff. And I like that as well, where it's sort of like, you know, this is the thing about some things about character. I'm like, no, no, this makes total sense. Like you're trapped in a
Yeah.
tube. It's got to be,
I kind of want him to be a little more of a professional. He seems unprofessional at multiple points. Um, and I get that that's kind of excused by these extraordinary circumstances. But of course, we later find out he didn't fire the missiles. So I mean, essentially,
mm,
is not a member of the American Navy in good standing, shall we say?
yeah. Well, he's the last
Um,
one left, so he's actually now
well, that's true.
he's now leading the American Admiralty. So yes,
Yeah, I mean, So I don't know. I mean, I have sort of mixed feelings about this, but I do think the fake news thing and the way that you're right about sort of like hope. You're sort of drilling down on ways that this movie does a better job of drama, of finding that drama
Yes.
of sort of between hope and cynicism. Um, and ultimately, I mean, this movie comes down on the side of science
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
data, and that's to its credit, for whatever negative things I have to say about its melodrama. Um, yeah, I mean, I think all that stuff is well done, and those are smart moves, and that's the right move to end Act One on,
Mm,
on your high point before you're going to pull the rug out from everybody, and
in part
um,
two.
yeah,
So let's talk about the PC then.
yeah. I mean, so Oh, the PC I have very mixed views on. So on the one hand, I like that it's an update. I love that it's a solar panel that obviously gets sun, and so it's transmitting at a slightly different time each day.
Hmm.
Like I think that's pretty genius, and a great update from the Telegraph. However, I'm not sure that it would start up and start instantly transmitting again. I'm willing to let that pass. What I'm not willing to let pass is it's transmitting a video file. I'm not sure why yeah, I mean, you said it as if it makes sense. I'm not sure why she's an Australian and she's transmitting her own news broadcast to her loved ones in Australia. I love that it is a news broadcast and it's ultimately a meaningless,
Hmm.
phrase that we abstract the meaning from because we're meaning searching animals. But I don't know, like, if I were sending a last transmission to my loved ones as I knew I was dead, I wouldn't be sending my last bit of work. Like,
Yeah.
here's what I did at the job site just as I realized the world was ending. Not, you've got a camera on your computer, record a new message, right? Um, that doesn't
Yes.
make sense. And then the tech you say like the text file is all garbled. I don't think it's a text file. I think it's a video file that they're unencoding and
Yes.
magically getting a transcript from, which this is not the way it works. So those are my objections. Like I love the core idea, but
Yeah.
it does have a few
It,
logistical problems.
no, I mean, I think one of the things this is was released in 2000, and it claims to be set in. Well, no, it isn't claim. It's set in 2006, so they're trying to add a sort of a bit of a there's some future tech in here. Like we've got computers. There's going to be new computers thing. Um. So yeah, but I agree with what you're saying. I think the text file thing is kind of funny. It made me chuckle a little bit again, where I'm just like, that's not how that works. Um. I have a one of the things I did even more so. You said about the news thing. One of the things I do like about the news file is it actually more so than it being a fluff piece. It's a conservation piece. It's actually about them doing something to save and protect the whales. Obviously, is the final message that's being launched around the world after we've clearly killed all the life in the north part of the world. So I thought that was actually a nice touch when it's sort of like, because again, we do care about animals. Like, people do watch news pieces about, uh, some
The
story of
panda in the zoo.
exactly, or
Yeah,
the little hippo, the baby hippo that's become a bit of a thing, and that like people like these stories. So, but the fact there's a conservation piece that's been launched whilst the world burns I thought was kind of a nice touch actually. Um,
I agree.
One thing I would say is though, I think the Coca-Cola bottle with the wind blowing um
Drawstring
the
with
drawstring
the
and think
blinds, right?
yeah and all that sort of thing felt more random and so
Hmm.
felt like it felt even more tragic than this. Um so yeah, that I actually like this update to an extent, but I do feel like the original feels more just so random that it kind of feels even more tragic that just sort of like wind and circumstances just so happen to knock this bottle on to this thing that's causing this thing to this telegraph, this Morse code to be launching. So I think that just felt more heartbreakingly tragic when you see it.
Yeah, I mean, to equal that, this would have to be like sending a backup transmission on, several hours to several days later
Mm,
of your broadcast, to the home country, and the computer just stops and is restarting or whatever. But then it wouldn't be a PC. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, this is not thought through. And yeah, I mean, I think the obviously like the telegraph thing wouldn't work today.
No, no.
But you're right that there is a sense of randomness, and I think that they haven't thought through the implications of the new idea. It's like they're
Yeah.
so in love with the solar panel idea, which is really smart,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that they're so in love with it that it's like that'll excuse all the rest, and it really doesn't.
No, yeah. It's a good idea that doesn't quite work, but I like the fact they tried in that sense of modernizing it and
Hmm.
updating it, which is kind of cool. And a cola bottle appears, you know, explicitly in the scene because they're like, we've got to pay homage to the original, um, just in case. Or
I do like how they throw the CD back. They're like, oh, let's take this message to her loved ones, and they're like, nah, they were on the north of Australia. They're
they're
already
gone.
dead. And
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, let's not. I mean, of course, they could have moved, right? But
yeah,
I do love the sort of like hopelessness of like, yeah, let's not even take her final message back to
yeah.
preserve for humanity. That's to me that if anything is cynical, that's pretty cynical.
Oh well,
Um,
this is where I think the cynicism starts to sort of set in, and I do like that moment where he just sort of throws the CD back onto the keyboard. He's just sort of like, yeah, yeah, right. Um, they obviously know that things are done. You know, things are all done now. But they drive down to San Francisco based on this thing of like, oh, well, several of the crew are from there, especially this guy, Bobby. Um, and we get to see what we didn't see before in the 59 because I think, special effects and bits and pieces that you see a sort of an empty but still standing San Francisco in 59. In 2000, you see a decimated San Francisco. You see the Golden Gate Bridge has been, is in tatters and San Francisco has been in ruins. But then across the bay is this other place that sort of is survived. Um, and it leads to the same thing where the guy sort of like, he's from there and he sort of gets off the ship. And I have problems with this. I kind of needed this explaining to me. So he runs down, goes into the torpedo bay to then launch himself out or to get out. But then the next thing we see is him on a rowboat outside the
mhm.
ship, and I was like, I don't know
Where'd
how
he
that
get the
works.
robot?
Yeah, why is he not wet? Like how they're
Yeah,
underwater? This doesn't seem to make any sense.
I agree.
Um, but again, you get the whole thing where he's like, no, I'm staying, and they let him die. He says, I've seen my folks. They didn't suffer. They went in peace, all this other stuff. And I think part of this works because of the way that I think the tone's been set on the um the submarine, the way I think for the most part has worked really well. This scene felt more poignant and impactful than it did in 59. um
I like the 59 one better,
mm,
slightly. I think the torpedo thing doesn't work.
yeah.
Um, the I think that this is more overtly emotional, and that sort of like reflects the era, right? I mean,
Hmm.
but I sort of like how restrained the 59 version is. Now, I don't know that you could duplicate that in 2000. People, especially men, are just a little more open with their emotions, despite how backward we are still about them.
Yes.
Um, in 59, it's all unsaid. But I love how effective emotions that aren't said can be. And I think the 59 version is a great example of that. Whereas I sort of feel that this works. But
Mm,
the torpedo thing annoys me. And the
yeah.
the other thing is that like the 59 version, while crude, it's just like the has that sort of 60s looking like, oh, there's a little submarine surfacing next to the boat, and it has that sort of like 60s kind of feel to it. That's
Yes.
sort of like I'm watching, the Batman's 66 movie or something.
Yeah.
And this sort of feels like oh, it's just a rowboat on a set, and I don't know if that's just me being biased in favor of old stuff or what, but
No, no, no.
um,
I know what you're saying. Um, yeah, I don't know. I see what you're saying, and I agree with sort of like some of when the torpedo, when the periscope and stuff comes up on this, and they talk to him, it feels kind of silly. It feels a bit like you can tell that, like, yeah, this is a set, and this is one of those moments when you're like, oh, this is quite a close shot. This is clearly, been done for a reason. That's fine. Um, but I think because I'd known this character of Bobby more, and I've understood more about the crew, and you spent more time with them and stuff. It feels more time like when he's like, no, I've got 4 or 5 days or whatever. But more so, this is where I feel this scene has the impact because then it eventually leads to the decision, you know, of do we stay or do we go? And again, this is you have these sort of they're looking for those heroic moments where they're sort of like a lot of people are like, no, this is where I'm from. I want to die. I'm either going to die here or 2 weeks. I'm going to die in Australia. Like I'll die where I was on my land, kind of thing. But then they do all vote to take Lieutenant Holmes home so he can see his family, and you get sort of so that it leads to other things. It has consequences. Um, but no, yeah, I don't know. I sort of lean towards more towards this version. I think on this one.
yeah, I mean, a few other things about the San Francisco sequence. I think that watching the original, I'm sort of annoyed that San Francisco isn't more destroyed. Watching this, I'm sort of equally annoyed at what is destroyed and what isn't. And there's as they look over the bay and they see this stuff that's relatively intact, there's this line about, well, it was a neutron bomb. But then why did it destroy these buildings?
Yeah,
You see all
yeah.
these skyscrapers and tatters, and what destroyed the Golden Gate Bridge? I mean, so I find myself sort of as annoyed or more annoyed. I mean, the special effects are fine. I mean, the
Uh-huh.
Golden Gate Bridge is very early CGI. It looks like a PlayStation 2 game, but that's fine. Um, it doesn't really bother me. But it's sort of like you've solved one problem but created another
Others, yeah.
that's as bad. So that sort of frustrates me. And I really hate that vote. That
Okay.
vote, I really hate that vote scene. I mean, Asante's terrible in that scene. Just like
Mm.
I want to shoot him. He's so annoying in that scene. I feel such anger for him at the self-righteousness of his character of like, don't don't consider, I don't want you to consider my opinion more than any other crewman. We're gonna put this to a vote. And it's like, well, you've done tons of things that
Mm.
were your decision, right? Um, why this one? Oh, this is the like character moment where we're supposed to care about you. It's not put to a vote in the 59 version at this point, I don't think.
No, it's not.
Um, and to me, it just seems this like needlessly democratic thing that really screws up the plot of the movie. Because what you're supposed to believe is that they took a vote and decided to go back to die in Australia so that this one guy could go back to his family. And then they decided to sail away and go back to San Francisco, presumably, to, die on American soil. Okay, so you basically changed your mind, right? Or you didn't change your mind, but you wanted to get that one guy home,
Yeah.
right? And so, and relay the news. I mean, it just feels like such an unnecessary step to me. And I really hate this kind of like raw moment of watching this vote. The hands going up is okay, I mean, I feel something there, I'm not in love with it, but I do feel something. But I don't know. I was so annoyed with this kind of like out of the blue, the captain is now going to take a vote and have this. It's just painted such as like his moment of courage where he,
Well, that's exactly what it's supposed to be, isn't it? Like he's just one man, and this is the decision that's going to be made. Like he's not going to take. He could, I mean, he could, but it would be he clearly sort of sees himself as one of the crew rather than like he's been made the admiral of whatever, but he refuses to take that sort of like that title and other things. So he clearly wants to be sort of part of the crew. So I know what you're saying. It's 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 clunky, and it is kind of it's the thing I was applauding it for not doing in the first half. Do you know what I mean? Where like, I'm like, oh, the
Yeah.
tone is settled, and they're doing this thing of hope versus cynicism, and then there's this lack of sort of like heroic moments kind of thing, and then they have this one, and you're like, oh, okay, well you kind of granted one, I suppose. Um, but this is where
Don't
I
they have a
think
duty to get back to report back? I
they
mean,
call it out. They literally call it out. They're like, well, we were told to go back and report and debrief the admiralty, and a lot of people are like, what's it matter? Like you've got 2 weeks to live. Like why bother? And you're like, well,
what
you kind of agreed to do it, so do
what
it.
I really don't understand is they've already let Bobby go, right?
Yes.
And I should point out another thing I'm uncomfortable by about Bobby is that Bobby's black. And they do have a way of right. It's the one black guy on the boat, who gets angry. Also, who got angry at playing cards that he wasn't gonna get his money back. Like he's the irascible black man
Yeah.
who, like what he really wants is he's just gonna go fishing and die. Like he's not gonna listen to orders. It makes me a little uncomfortable. But so that makes me uncomfortable. But then the implication is that it's fine for him to stay. Why not just say anyone who wants to stay, we're going to
Stay.
surface,
Yeah.
stay. Like, you can go. Why do you even have to take a vote except for this dumb fucking scene that I hate and makes me want I would kill my admiral if I were on that submarine. I'd just be mutiny time and just raise a gun to his head and blow
Well,
him away.
I think that's the point, isn't it? That's the thing he's trying to avoid is um he's trying to avoid that sense of mutiny, sort of like, we're in this together, we're a team. So they are trying to avoid that. But I know what you're saying. It feels
But you can go back to Australia. Just say those of us who want to complete the mission and go back to Australia. I'm going to go back to Australia.
hmm,
We got to take this guy home and relay this information. Anyone who wants to stay with Bobby can stay with Bobby, and I understand. And I won't note it in your permanent record. Like oh, that's the noble
well,
thing.
I
Why
would
not
say
that?
though, I would the one thing I would say is I'm assuming submarines are very complicated. And if certain people decide to stay, are there things on the ship that just can't be done? Like, all right, if the chefs and stuff go, then fine, we can cook the food. But like, if your sonar guy or one of those other people that kind of knows how the parts of the ship really work, then you might be a bit more stuffed. I don't know.
There's got to be redundancy. But if that's the
Yes.
case, then have that conversation. Then be
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry, Mike. We need you. You're the best sonar man, Uh, okay. And then Mike's like, right, I'm gonna go back to Australia for the team. Okay, so that gives you more runtime, do it
Yeah.
that way. But and then when they ship out at the end, I feel like, well, we could have avoided this if you just let the people go ashore who wanted to go ashore.
Yeah. I feel like the thing is they're trying to have this whole thing around democracy as well, aren't they? That this isn't, there's a portion of this they shift their point of view, I think, for this the finale, let's say the final third. We've run through the hope versus cynicism thing, and as you said, science and data wins out because that's the truth. Facts matter. So they're kind of shifting now to okay, well now we know the truth. How do you deal with it? That's kind of is so the final sort of part of the film is do you uphold um, what we know to be, the values of humanity, so democracy, friendship, social order, or do you fall into chaos? And I think the film shows, these ideas of sort of falling into chaos. And again, the two sides are sort of there, where you have um, Armando Santes, Towers is this kind of thing about social order and standing by his friends because his second in command gets radiation sickness and he stays with him. He then wanders into town and he sees the sort of disarray. I was kind of surprised that they were able to show two people humping up the side of a building.
Mm.
That was like, oh Christ, okay, cool. But they show the chaos, and he has a moment with people in silence eating beans in a small shop. But he's the man of sort of like they cut it out. He's the man of duty. He's the man of sort of civilization. Like he chose democracy to this rather than command. However, again, Dr. Osborne chooses the disorder. Like he's the one at the end, after everything, just chooses his car and he decides to, he goes off to drive around and he ends up committing suicide by launching himself in his car through a barrier. So I feel that that's what they've shifted that thing now. They're trying to keep those two poles, the binary approach, but it's kind of like, oh, how do is it order or chaos? Is that how we go out? And it's trying to show you the two different ways.
Yeah, I think you've sold me on the hope versus cynicism or realism.
Yeah.
I don't think you've sold me on this one.
Okay.
And I don't think this one works as well. I mean, I think that if Julian is represents disorder, it's more in his stealing of the
The
vet girl.
Rembrandt and yeah.
Yeah. Um, where it's basically incited a riot and doesn't seem to care. Um, the he doesn't participate in any other sort of like looting or violence, and he only kills himself when he has already made a play for the woman he loves who's unavailable to him.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel that he was a great representative of disorder. And I feel like the captain, if you want to represent duty, I mean, of course, we'll have to talk about the ending at some point, but if you want to represent duty, why leave this up to a vote? I mean, duty should be we have a mission and I expect you boys to complete it.
That's fair. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. No, yeah, I wasn't just reaching for straws. I think it's there,
No.
maybe, but maybe my essay on this one is a little
Well, you're right
needs
about
a
like the
little work.
writing, right? Like
Yeah,
we
yeah,
see that writing and we see the conversation with the beans, and there is that element that's there. I'm just not sure that the characters are as clearly aligned
yeah,
as they really should be, right? Because I
yeah,
mean, the central dynamic in both films is, that the main character is a man of duty and, puts duty even to the end above,
everything
um,
else.
but that whole like vote thing to me just it's amazing how much that gets in the way, because like I like that he didn't fire the missiles, and I mentioned I like that the Americans are disliked and he didn't fire the missiles in that whole plot. But when you put it up to a vote and it's turned into kind of like a club as opposed to military discipline, then at the end I sort of feel like I like why is he sailing off with them, like
Mm.
there's a sense of duty. Well, why? I mean, I feel like it undermines exactly that kind of dynamic that is so important in the 59 version. In an attempt to humanize him, to make him more of a sort of like the, uh, you know, Braveheart kind of character saying, all right,
Yes.
boys, we're gonna vote on this. Don't take my word more than anyone else, this kind of nonsense.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. You are right, and it's clunky, and that's what I'm saying. It feels cheap in that sense, and it doesn't work because, like you said before, that he has called out that, like I'm the commander, and this is what's happening. He's clearly done that before and made unilateral decisions and ran with them. So yes, I get what you're saying. Um,
Yeah, it also just doesn't make sense,
no,
but I do feel like it undermines the whole dynamic of the ending. That I
mm,
mean, he's become a kind of like touchy-feely sort of, ironically, a very American movie sort of character, although this was an Australian
yeah.
co-production.
Well, let's get to the ending because they do return to. His friend gets ill. He decides to stay with him, but generally, like the ending of the film is kind of winding towards the inevitable. Um, and how does it handle it? There are two parts of this ending that I liked. Um, that I didn't see in the 59. Now in the 59, you had that thing of like, there's always time, there's hope. There was that banner. Then they
Hmm.
replicate the banner, but they don't use it in the same way. That they're tearing it down at this one point to sort of show there is no more time. Um, Two of the things that sort of there was one that annoyed me when the guy gets out the gun during the variety bit. I was like, that just feels, Australia has quite tight gun laws, so that sort of felt a little bit, like an American introduction. But within
There are
this,
guns in Australia, though. I
oh, there
mean,
are, but like not, yeah, yeah, but
it's not. They're more liberal, especially with the outback, than Britain.
yes, yeah.
You know.
Um, but the two bits that sort of work in this for me are um one's with the family. So there is this kind of, there's a conversation between Moira and Lieutenant Holmes when she sort of says to him, sort of like, how's she doing? And he says, like, she still hasn't kind of adjusted to the reality of it. Like, the reality is known, but she's still, doing gardening and she's still playing with the kids. And like, there's still this sort of not kind of reluctance. It's not until she's sick in the garden that, it's almost like she's pushing it to the back of her mind constantly. I like that it remains. She sort of remains. That's her character. She doesn't want to face up to this, and so I like that. But the other one is during the riot bit, or no, I think it's actually when Dr. Osborne drives off in his Ferrari. There's a moment, and you see the city. You see Melbourne or Sydney. I think it's Sydney, isn't it? And often you've seen the rioting and all this other stuff, and what you've seen people queuing up to be given the suicide drugs and stuff, and so there's all that. And that's all been replicated. But there's a scene where he drives past, and there's just sort of people just sort of sat in the street, and I kind of like that where people have just sort of given up. There's just this sort of
Hmm.
sense of like listless, despair. Like they're not shouting at the sky. There's not endless weeping or sort of hysterics. There's just sort of there's a woman sort of like just slouched on her knees, and there's a good old guy who sort of stood there, not
Yeah.
moving. And I was like, oh, that's a really good shot. Like, yeah, they're just sort of they can't process the inevitability of this. And I was like, yeah, that's a really cool shot. Like that's it. There's just they've been broken by this. Like there's just the overwhelming sort of tragedy of it is just broken them and they've just sort of stopped. And I was just like, that's a really like that hit me quite hard. And I was like, that's a cool scene. That's a cool shot. But also like, yeah, I can see that. Like some people just stop functioning almost. So those two bits kind of work for me.
I think that's a cool shot too. I think the banner and the religious aspect is something lost from the 59
Yeah.
version
I
that we
yeah, I
liked
agree.
in the 59.
I agree. Yeah.
I think that's a cool shot. I'm not sure why they're sort of standing so still. Like it's hard to stand for,
Yeah.
24 hours or something. I mean, so I find myself kind of questioning that. But I did like some of those shots. Um, I am constantly befuddled and frustrated by how clean the streets are. I mean, it's got these constant shots of like unoccupied streets that are very sort of like Vanilla Sky, right? Like
Yes.
there's an effectiveness to seeing an urban street empty in cinema. Having said that, they've like scattered newspapers, and then like, right, this is and it's like there's no overturned bicycles, there's no, burned out car wrecks, there's no, barricades that rioters have constructed. I mean, everything is remarkably pristine. It's like we've got the city street for exactly 1 hour to film this. Throw the newspapers and get the
Yeah.
Ferrari.
That's it. Although it is totally like we have got this permit. It allows us to do this. It costs more if we want to damage anything or leave litter behind. So we don't. And then we're going to get the shot and we're going to move on. So, and again, I think this is down to budget restraints. And so, like it's clear. But again, I don't mind that. I'm fine with that. I always I like those isolation shots. Do you know what I mean? When you do get, and especially when it doesn't feel like it's CGI. We said it's about sort of like the um Amiga Man, and
Hmm.
a couple of those others. When you think like, wow, we know that's not CGI. That is a legit abandoned, like New York or Los Angeles street, compared to like I Am Legend, where he's driving through New York, and you're like, oh yeah, that's fine. That's a computer, animate the CGI kind of thing. Um, so yeah, no, I like that though. I know I get what you're saying. They're very well swept post-apocalyptic streets, but I still like the lack of people is kind of like impactful in that sense.
Yeah, I'm sort of, on the fence. I like that same sense of isolation too. But if you're going to depict a riot, I mean, the other thing is, doesn't anyone want that Ferrari? I mean, like we've seen lawlessness. Isn't anyone going to attack him in his Ferrari? I mean, like
They
you
have that
rich fuck,
Ferrari. They have that
you know.
Ferrari for 4 days,
Yeah,
and it's
not as
got
every scratch was gonna be off insurance. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
They
horrible.
had they had one for a week, and it had to go back in the same condition that they had it. That was the rule. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get to the death sequences.
Yes.
All,
Go on
all
then.
of which, all of which are changed from the original. I
Hmm.
mean, for me, and you having seen the original, it's sort of like, it, you know, you're like you said, you had the question of sort of like, would this work the first time through? And I think we both think it would. We sort of are playing the game of sort of like spot the difference
Yes.
along with, you know, enjoying the movie on its own terms. And it seems every death has been radically changed in one way or another.
Yeah.
Uh, so what did you make of the death sequences? Did they overall work for you? Which ones did or didn't?
I think again, I think the family one does, and I think the Doctor Osborne one does. They've changed it to because in that we said in the original 59, you have that they go to see a race, don't they? They actually witness a race where the drivers don't care enough to slow down for the corners and end up having these like massive accidents, and it's almost like a demolition derby kind of thing. Um, and so they basically put that onto Doctor Osborne. So his was a suicide in his garage, wasn't it? Before, that's kind of passive. He sits in his racing car and just sort of gasses himself. With this, I feel it feels in character for the Brian Brown version of Doctor Osborne, where he was, he's like you say, he's lost Moira, and so he is now just, um, he's just going to go out on his terms with his Ferrari and in a blaze of flame. So I like that. Fine, I'm happy with that. It works for the character that they've now presented me with. If it had him doing in a garage sat in a car, sort of like inhaling the fumes, I think I'd be more disappointed because that wouldn't feel in character with the version we've been shown. The family one works again because it's taking the place of other bits and pieces where yes, they're going to line the bed and they're going to inject the daughter and then they're going to take the blue pill and they're going to fall asleep and it's their suicide. It's tragic, but it's inevitable. And I like again Mary's response when he's giving the daughter the reaction and she sort of can't watch and all this other stuff. It's poignant. It works enough. But the Moira and Towers one, I don't know.
Well, let's come back to that. So,
Yeah.
so I sort of feel like the Julian death is kind of terrible.
Mm,
I feel like I know what you're saying. Like it's inconsistent with this character, but outside of him being a brush kind of Aussie, I don't know what his character is. I mean, I know he's sort of like, you know, the rational one. He's brush. He's learned something about love and made mistakes in life. I mean, okay. I mean, you could summarize his character in two sentences, and they're both kind of generic. Um, I feel like especially when he doesn't take the suicide pill, he sees the line and he leaves. I thought,
mm,
oh, okay, they're gonna have him kill himself with carbon monoxide poisoning.
mm.
Um, no, I feel like, this whole episode should, like, all of these episodes that we're doing for this entire season should have massive trigger warnings at the
Yeah,
beginning, like suicide, like
yeah,
tons of fucked up shit. Cannibalism, if you've had a loved one cannibalized, you might not want to watch this. Um, but the racetrack, of course, there are no other racers. He's doing
hmm
it by himself. I like the sort of demolition derby thing. Of course, this saves money. We
yeah,
both pointed out how much money must have been spent on that 59 version for a scene that's really not very important.
mm.
Um, you know, uh, so, and of course, the FX of the explosion are truly terrible, truly some early Photoshop quality. I mean, stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The wheel that comes flying off at the
Yeah,
screen that's like,
for all
clip
the sort
art.
of for all the faint praise I give for San Francisco and for the sort of submarine, where I'm like, yeah, it's fine, it's good enough. Oh, they throw it out the window with this. Like it is some airbrush painted on fire that looks dreadful. Yeah, like it's awful. Yeah, it's hilarious how bad
Yeah,
the crash is. But I get the
every
point.
YouTube video where like they've added, muzzle flash and, random flames to things looks better than this.
Yes.
Now, okay, this is old at this point, it's 24 years old or whatever, um, but it looks bad, and he just kind of takes his hands off the wheels, and
Mm.
I mean, it's fine, but I feel like I love that carbon monoxide scene so much.
Yeah.
Uh, I just love that scene. And I feel like I'm so attached to those death scenes in the 59 version. Um, and so much of it is the surprise of your brain going, "Oh my God, they're doing this!" Like,
Yeah.
and the way they're done, so that you're not entirely sure what's happening until
It
you
happens.
you sort of realize, like, oh,
Yeah.
they're killing themselves,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm watching this, right? Like, that's sort of reproduces the shock and the unreality
Mm.
of this moment. Him taking his hands off the wheel, is just doesn't have the same effectiveness for me. Now the family killing themselves, what makes the 59 version work is what I'm saying about you don't know initially what's going on, and then you
Off
realize,
screen.
yeah, they've already taken the pills off screen. Um, this version, they decide to dramatize that, and I think it works equally well.
Mm.
I mean, I think this is a classic case of like a remake that takes another approach, chooses to show something that the earlier version was entirely worked because it didn't show.
hmm
And there's an effectiveness in showing it. And then there are fictional opportunities there. And then there are fictional opportunities in not showing it. And I think this is a sort of, you could just show to like a class on remake or on creative writing like these two death sequences and
hmm
show, look at the advantages of doing it this way, look at the advantages of doing it that way. You're gaining and losing something either way. Neither one is right. Both are very effective in what they're doing. um I think I slightly prefer the 59, but I really respect and admire, this is a kind of case study in two effective ways of doing
Mm.
something, that is just a classic case study in a good remake, Um, right. So we're on to Moira and this is where the entire movie decides to jump the shark,
Yes.
in my opinion.
No, I agree. Yeah, strawberries and all. This is the fact that it ends with this after
Well,
having
it's
so
worse
many
than
sort of
that.
yeah.
Okay, it's worse than that because he goes back to her and we have this helicopter ride, which I kind of like in the sense of like, there is a sense of like they're living a life to the max, but only once they realize death is, days
Inevitable.
away.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of like that, but it's also, cheesy. It's also, exaggerated. It's soap opera-ish. And then he goes back to the ship and then comes back to her to say,
Oh.
I'm leaving after all, and then goes back to the ship, and then comes back to her at the end. And I'm like, this is quite a distance.
Yeah.
Like this is across the continent. I
Well,
mean,
no,
the fact
it's
that
not. It's
trains
not.
are still
It's not
running.
so much quite across the continent, but they've shown that this is a train ride between
Yeah.
Sydney and where they're living, like a long train ride. So yeah, this thing of him bouncing back and forth gets really irritating.
Yeah. It really frustrates me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that frustrates me. The whole sort of scene where he lands on a helicopter and says, I'm not gonna go with you, I think it's melodramatic. It's not very effective. I mean, she is by far the most interesting character. I mean,
Mm.
and a change from the original. And then, of course, you have this final scene where, I keep thinking like, oh, they're not going to show the shot of her on the cliffs, right? The final shot of the original. And you get it earlier and it's not the final shot. And then, you have more stuff and then you get the final shot and I'm like, oh, they show it earlier for her on the cliffs. And I think, okay, so she's not going to see the submarine, right?
Mm.
Because maybe they didn't have money for that. And then you see her and she is indeed watching the submarine. And I'm like, oh, okay. That wasn't very effective that you showed a duplicate of that scene earlier without the submarine. But then he appears. And at first I thought, this is a fantasy
Yeah, I thought the same.
because we have so many fantasies of like he's hallucinating all the time.
Yeah.
He's apparently gone through some Weapon X like program that's caused him to hallucinate. Um, and he just appears, and then the movie ends, and I realize, oh, that wasn't a hallucination. He's really there. This is one of those moments that we've talked about before that I truly hate,
Hmm.
where a movie has set up completely a decision and then decided any character could just decide to do anything
Hmm.
on the spur of the moment.
The point of the 59 what's interesting is I've read some of the views on sort of like Letterboxd and IMDb, and they both get the 59, the 2000 get some high praise from people that are like, this makes some brave choices, it's depressing, be warned, and all that sort of stuff. But one of the things I find interesting is like people are going like, oh, but the 59 version's more about, humanity and hope and all this other stuff, and I'm going like, did you watch the same film as me? Like, that film ends on a downer. Like, that film, like,
Oh yeah.
really, like, it may have like a more poignant approach to certain things. I think the one thing I'd say that this has bit more of a brutality is probably the too strong a word, but I'm like, to the end, it wants to be kind of impactful. Like, it's looking to slap you in the face a little bit, more so than the film wants to do, or the film can get away with more or less, I should say. Like, I think this because this is a TV film and it's got to get the ratings. I think they're like, we want a car explosion, like, we want something, and you've got to see this family. I want people weeping at home because they're going to see that they're giving their daughter a suicide injection. Like, this is looking to be kind of shocking in this final moment, and so I am
We
in
should
my
see the needle going in, by the
oh
way.
yeah.
We should see that needle going
Well, that's the only bit that's implied, isn't it? Because you hear the daughter make a noise, and then the mum sort of turns away. Mary turns away and reacts to it and stuff. But so I'm fully going like, oh, this is going to have that final shot,
in.
right? That we know that they're all off to die in San Francisco if they even make it, and she's going to stand on the cliffs and watch them go. All right, cool. All right, you're going to go for that. That's kind of impactful. That's a good, and you're going for it. Brilliant. And then, and I'm,
Well,
'cause
then you have the strawberries and she's got the suicide pill. So
yeah,
then I'm thinking they're going to change it, but they're going to change it by her dying,
yeah,
her taking the pills as she watches it. And it's like, oh, that's even more of a gut punch. Good
yeah.
for you.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought was going to happen. And then all of a sudden, like, he turns up, and I'm like,
Amanda Sante strolls onto the scene out of
yeah,
nowhere.
and I'm like, how did he get off the submarine? Did he come out the torpedo hatch as well? Like, I don't understand what's going on. And then it ends, and I was just like, oh, okay. Like, I was really kind of like, I was proper taking. I had to pause it because the credits start, and I was like, oh, that's it. Like, it kind of undermines everything you've just been doing for the last 15 minutes.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah. I mean, what's funny is this is the, Australian co-production,
Yeah,
right? This is the Hollywood ending. I
it
mean, this
is.
is like what the studios forced somebody to change that, they bitch about in the director's cut forever, right? I mean, this
Oh
is
no,
so cringeworthy.
this is where the Blu-ray edition would have the alternate ending where she did exactly what we said, where she stands on the cliff and or she we see the submarine go past and we see her take the suicide pill. Or even before that, we know she's taken it and we see her passing out or as the submarine goes past. And you'd be like, this is the ending we wanted, but the execs didn't want us to end on a down note, so we had to have them reunited. So we just brought Armand back for the afternoon to walk up a hill. Like,
Yeah.
that's what it
Yeah, and
is.
it feels like that.
Yeah, it does. It really does. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is really cringe. It is really terrible. I mean, it is similar to Bruce Willis's friend surviving in uh Hudson Hawk,
Oh,
you know, except Pat knows it's terrible
yeah.
and makes a joke out of it. I still don't think it quite works, but like
I would love
it's a
it.
comedy and like
Who'd have fucking known? Like Amanda Sante comes up and he's sort of like, yeah, yeah,
she says, "You
airbags.
decided to stay," and he's
Yeah,
just like, "Yeah, can you believe it?"
yeah,
In a Brooklyn
airbags.
accent.
Yeah, yeah, I was kind of gobsmacked a little bit by this ending, by the last kind of like, it's a bit like, um, it keeps I like so again I like the car crash. I was quite happy with that. I like the fact well, like's probably the wrong word, but I appreciated the endings that they were giving me.
Mhm.
And it's almost like it keeps serving you, and then just before the very, very end, just before leaving the building or leaving the room, it runs up and just slaps you in the face, and then runs out again, and you're just like, what the hell was that for? Like I've just sat for 3.5 hours watching this. What'd you do that
Yeah.
for? Um, yeah, it doesn't undermine everything. I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't ruin it for me. I still really like this version, and I think it does a lot well. I almost want to forgive it certain things because I know it's a TV movie and had certain run times to
No.
fill. No, I've got to give it.
No.
No, I've got to judge it on that. Like it had certain times. I could see an edited down version of this being much tighter and much better. Um,
Yeah, with some stuff added, right? I mean,
yeah.
CG some debris into the streets and show the needle going in,
Do
change the ending,
you know what I missed the
no more
most?
Democratic vote.
Do you know the bit I missed the most? That really was I didn't realize how much impacted me in the first film. I think I'm sure it was in that one. Was the guy adjusting the we talked about the guy
Mm,
adjusting the framed
picture frame.
paintings
Yeah,
in the
in the
Navy
bar.
Club in the
Yeah.
Navy Club, and he's sort of like the you've seen him throughout, and he's been sort of it's the men's club or the gentleman's club kind of thing, and he served drinks, and at the end of it, he still adjusts that. It's moments like that in that
Mm.
59 version that you kind of realize that it has that sort of although it acknowledges the realism and the sort of the inevitability of the final situation, there's more of a gentleness to it in that sense of like, oh, I'm not leaving this place in a shithole. I want to go.
Yeah, and this has elements of that, right? Like, the sister repairing the house,
Yeah,
I mean, although that camera pull out after they're dead is too long and sentimental.
and
But
swings around all over the place. But yeah,
yeah, yeah, I agree. But there are elements of that. But I think what you're pointing to is that 59 version has that play-like quality
hmm
that I love about scripts from that era. Um, I mean, from basically the 30s to the 60s, and even into the sort of like auteur 70s. There's so much tight writing.
Mm.
And that 59 version is coming in an era where people are looking to playwrights as real writers.
Yeah.
And Hollywood is still in their shadow and so it wants to be novelistic. It wants to be like a play. And that's the kind of like subtle thing you would do in a novel or in a play, right?
Hmm.
That would be super effective and it works in a movie. By 2000, nobody's
Gone.
writing movies like that anymore, right? Now, it, it- that's just a lost
Mm.
writing is just a lost art by that point. So that love, that degree of subtlety, that degree of understatement is something that I think has just been lost. And
Well,
there are trace elements of it here,
yeah.
but it doesn't. It's just not written in that mode.
I recently watched. I'll end on this actually. We'll wrap up on this. But I recently watched Titanic. Rewatched it with. We introduced Ellie to it. Um, and in watching that, for all of its, you know, good and bad, I actually think it's an exceptional film. But I think there are some clunky bits in it, and I think a bit like this, it overplays on certain things and that sort of thing. However, that final inevitability, there's a kind of scene at the end of it, and it's kind of maudlin with but they have certain scenes like that, don't they, where it does have that moment of like the band played on till the very end, but there's not moments of like the guy, the engineer that designed the ship, of him just like adjusting the clock so that it does say the right time, and then there's some of the bits and there's moments like that which are exactly as you're saying, when you're sort of like, even in the face of inevitability, there's kind of like a sense of order or purpose, and sort of certain things play out, and they have a sort of a poignancy because I think we can relate to them, and they're small, they're very small, tiny acts at time, and they can be very, very impactful. And I just think you're right. Sometimes these things have to be overblown in order, because it's all about TV ratings or whatever. And I think you're right; they get lost. But when they are done in films, they are very impactful because they're human moments. They're just little silly human moments that kind of feel important when they're not, but they are at the same time. So I think it's yeah. I wish there was more of them in certain films that just you know they add a tragedy to these things that you know I sort of connect with.
Yeah, I just want to point out that the relationship between Towers and Moira
Mm.
is so fundamentally different in this film um, than the 59. And I think of the 59 one, obviously it's Peck and Gardner, like, they're classic kind of characters. Obviously the best love stories are stories in which love is lost, right?
Hmm.
I found myself thinking of Madame Butterfly, at the end of this. There are exceptions to that. Anything starring Winona Ryder has automatically earned its happy ending in my book.
Yeah.
But but usually that's the best love story, right?
Mm.
It's a sadness. And it recognizes, especially in a movie like this, that all love stories, no matter how wonderful and beautiful, end in death,
Mm.
right? Run the
Clock
love story
forward.
forward,
Yeah.
and no story ends happily. Having said that, like, to me, their relationship is so fundamentally different. And I think that in the original, the family, his family is underplayed.
Oh,
And
massively.
so
Yeah.
that he's sort of struggling with this, but he doesn't talk about it. He doesn't have Weapon X style flashbacks to it.
Time slips.
Here
He's able to slip through time.
and he's, well, yeah, he's actually been possessed by the guy from Quantum Leap,
Yes.
who's now, um, yeah, I mean, it's very bizarre. I mean, it's like he's able to look at a portrait without having a interactive flashback. Um, and so here, because that's so overdone, his so much of the movie is about his family,
Mm-hmm.
and him overcoming that. Whereas that's very underplayed. It's
Mm.
there in the original. It's still his arc, but it's very underplayed. And so in the original, I feel like this was a great romance. It might not have been the romance of their lives. It might have been. We don't know, but it certainly was the last romance of their
Mm.
lives. And it does feel like it was a great romance, and it feels like a tragedy that they didn't have time together. Here, I think Moira is by far the most interesting character. I think Ward is, the best actor in this whole thing. And she comes off a little bit, like a magic pixie dream girl. She's like a little wonky, a little strange. She sleeps with Julian, and regrets it. Um, and I'm fine with all of that. I think she seems like a confused, semi-alcoholic kind of
Yeah.
version of the Ava Gardner character. I like those changes. She's an interesting character, but he feels so obsessed with his family. And then at the end, as she's on the cliff, she says she's drinking champagne, ready to kill herself. I'm not even sure if like the pill is in that champagne or not. I don't think it is ultimately, but as she's drinking it, I'm wondering.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she says like, "Well, this was a mistake,"
Yeah.
like yet another,
Another
yet
man's
another
let me
mistake.
down.
So you can't go from this is a mistake to, oh, the love of my life has returned by him just showing up. That doesn't redeem those sentiments. And so I end up feeling like instead of feeling like this is this odd, powerful romance under these extenuating circumstances, I end up feeling like, oh, this was this sad, desperate, like, well, you were there and good enough, kind of,
Oh, I definitely felt that.
Uh,
And
yeah.
she even says that to Dr. Osborne, to Julian. She says, like, he comes,
Mm-hmm.
he takes her into the bed, and she sort of says, "I don't love you. I just don't want to die alone." And then when he's driving off, it really does feel like she's annoyed because she's been left alone by everybody, rather than, oh, I've
Mm-hmm.
lost the potential for this great love. It's almost like an irritant is like, well, I'm left alone then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Like the whole, I like their, I actually kind of like a lot of their interactions, and I think you're right. She becomes the overcoming those first 40 minutes where she actually really irritates me. She does become her arc is is the best.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think some of their sort of like the way they connect and some of those pieces is fine. He's the problem, but I also think, like you say, they kind of they kind of made this decision to be like, oh, he's he calls her Sarah, like his wife's name, and he makes several time slip fantasies into this past and all this other stuff. Like there's this obsession with the lost family, and it's not until the end, like he at the end of the film, to go back to her, he takes his wedding ring off and all this other stuff. Um, and it it's almost like they don't know how to deal with grief in this situation. Like he has a moment where in the Alaska house, he sees you see he wanders around that house with the foam all over it, and he sees the family in the bed, and they've all committed suicide using the tablets and stuff.
God.
But before he does that, he sort of it overlays onto his home, in America, and then he has this sort of flash of when the bomb went off, and he's like, the wife even shouts at him, "Why aren't you here?" And it's like, is this what you think happened at that moment? Um, yeah, and
It's so melodramatic. Yeah.
no, everything to do with his family. All those flashbacks are awful. They don't work.
Mhm.
His thing with the family. This is what I agree with you. The Gregory Peck version of that works better. But you could have done this but you could have had it as a conversation with her. Like if
Mhm.
he was the one that was having the conversation with Moira and saying like, "Look, I'm really conflicted.
Mhm.
I know where this is going. There is some hope, but like, there's an attraction here." She kind of raises it at one point when she says like, "It feels like I know this feels like
Right.
cheating for you," and he never really responds. But that was the opening to a conversation where he can say, I don't know how to deal with this. I was never there. I've not. I The last time I saw them, they were alive, and
Hmm.
dealing with the abstract concept of them having been destroyed by this bomb is kind of difficult. So I haven't been able to picture them as dead yet. Do you know what I mean? Like there
Hmm.
needs to
I
be
know
that.
they're probably gone, but it's hard to really believe that and
Yeah,
internalize
exactly.
that.
Like in my head, they're still alive, waiting for me, kind of thing. Like he needs to
Hmm.
have that conversation, and in a 3 hour and 15 minute film, they don't, and that's why it kind of it rankles with me that like you know, I think the relationship is fine, but they need to have had that interaction.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, and not only because it's the 3.5 hour movie, but also because it's so much more sentimental and wears the characters wear their emotions on their sleeve compared to the 59 version.
Yeah,
How do you not have that?
no,
I mean, like Asante is all about emoting, but mostly anger, you know, and hero scenes, right? Like, but actually talking, having a normal conversation with the woman who you're spending the last days of your life with, like, seems beyond this movie's ability to contemplate.
he doesn't have to have it with her. He could have it with like
Hmm.
Lieutenant Holmes. Do you know what? It would be really interesting if he had that with Doctor Osborne.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
Yeah.
if like Osborne's like, we are competing for this thing, and he's like, I don't even know if I'm competing for her at this point. I can't get past the fact that my wife and child are dead. Like
Right.
that conversation needs to happen with someone for him to be processing it, but it never does. It's weird.
Well, and I'm okay with it being like at a fair that doesn't mean too much. Like maybe they have love for each other, but it's not the greatest love of either of their lives. I mean, you know, I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it being a kind of like lost in translation, ships passing in the night, kind of like there's an affection here, but it wasn't the great love kind of thing. That's great. It doesn't, not everything has to be the great love, right? But
It,
this movie doesn't know what it is
exactly.
because sometimes it's that, and I mean, and then sometimes it's the great love affair. And the end is the great love affair, but the scene before it is this didn't
Not.
mean anything. This was a
Yeah.
mistake. She sort of says like basically like I'm a drunk careening off the tracks my entire life. Well, he's here, so that must mean it's the great love of my life. I mean, was this movie made by people who are drunks careening from one relationship to another? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. This feels like a mandated end. You're right. I think if she, I don't know, it feels like such an end on an update on an upbeat kind of, but like yeah, it kind of pissed me off.
Yeah. No,
Um,
it's bad. Uh
yeah. Anyway, we will
yeah.
wrap it. Any final thoughts then on the overall on the beach 2000?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there are elements of this that could be used as like a case study in successful adaptation, successful remake.
Mm.
Um, there are things in this that I think recommend it. I'm a huge fan of the original. And I am not against remakes. I think this is important material. Yet the irony is that a nuclear exchange over Taiwan is more realistic today,
Oh yeah.
than it was in 2000.
When
Um,
when he says we aren't the ones that invaded Taiwan, I was like, this feels like prescient. Yeah, this film's ahead of its time.
yeah, just wait for, 4 or 5 years from now to
Yeah.
see. We'll see, right? Who knows? But yeah, there are elements of this that I really like. I'm glad it's a thing that exists in the world.
Mm.
Uh, but there are also elements that are not so good.
Yeah. No, I feel similar. Like I know people that like the melodrama and the soap opera, and it feels like this is a TV film rather than a feature film. So I feel that there's those elements that have to be taken into. You have to I feel I have to judge it on a slightly different curve because of those things, which are maybe wrong, but um, I'm going to. So I will. And that's why I sort of forgive it for things that I think I wouldn't in a feature film. Um, But there are, like I said, there are things again that still work for me. I think some of the characters are fine. I think some of the acting is okay, is solid enough. I think Armando Sante is kind of the weak point, as you sort of say. Miscast compared to the others, um, is bizarrely so. Um, but actually, I like this story, and it sounds this is kind of it's a sad, sad story. There's an inevitability. There's a tragic inevitability to this, and whilst I think the 59 version, I like them both about the same. I think the 59 version it does some really good stuff. I think the whole religious thing at the end. I think it's the endings. It's how you handle the endings of things. I
Hmm.
think this handles the reveals well and the lead up, and then how does it handle that ending? And I think the 59 version leaves you on an aching of sort of like that's tragic. Like it's not a film to watch before you go to bed. Like you need to watch something after to sort of
Cleanse your
um
palate.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. This sort of goes that way and then decides to sort of do a bit of a thing of go, well, no, we're going to do something different. And I think that's a real shame. But I think a lot of it works. I think this is slightly more in your face and more brutal in its a sort of depiction of how people would react to that inevitability. Like, there's looting and stuff. And I'm like, and then what I find funny is the scene near the beginning of the film where there's some looting and no one's doing anything. And they're
Hmm.
stealing computer monitors. And one of them grabs a computer keyboard and stuff. At the end of the film, towards the end of the film, when Towers sort of takes a stroll through the city and he goes down like an entry, like an alleyway, and there's like refugees living there, and it's all debauchery. Three monitors and a keyboard get thrown off the top of a building. And I was like, I don't know if they've done that on purpose, like that might be something, but there's like, oh, even the stuff you've stolen, you now know is pointless and you're just hurling it off tall buildings. Like, there was certain little parts like that where I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. And there's other bits. So as you say, I like that this exists. I don't think I'm ever going to go back and sit for 3 hours and 15 minutes to watch all this again. But it's free on YouTube, and actually, the version that's on YouTube is really good quality. I was kind of shocked. Um, it's kind of worth a. I'd recommend. I think marginally, I would recommend the 59 version over this.
I think the 59 version is way better. I mean, for
Mm.
me, the 59 version is just, well acted, well scripted. It has a few elements that are dated or where you see the limitations of censorship. Um, in terms of judging this one by being a TV movie, I would say I totally agree when it comes to like CGI, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I can kind of, let like I can kind of let like the car crash go, you know, the decision to kill him that way, that's a decision that is fair game. The thing that I would say is most missing from this is if you're going to do a 3 hour version for television that's more soap operatic, have the soap opera stuff work.
Yeah.
And it really just does it. I mean, and for me, the Moira and Armand Asante stuff just needs the soap operatic scenes. There's 30 minutes of just soap operatic stuff between them that's missing from this movie.
Mm.
That could replace 30 minutes of dull stuff that was inserted for length. If you're gonna do, you could do good soap opera.
Mm.
I'm all
Melodrama.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just feel like this fails on its own terms, if that makes sense.
No, I agree. There are parts that I definitely agree with. That there is some of the soap opera and some of the melodrama definitely feels underplayed or even sort of badly served. But yeah, but I don't know. I still kind of like this. Anyway, we are coming to the end of our post-apocalyptic Patreon and main feed. We have Oblivion left. Tom Cruise is Oblivion, which we'll do on the next episode. But and then beyond that, on the main feed, we're pretty much done. We've got the wrap up coming. We've done some cheery fucking films over there, and we ended on The Road, which was an absolute
Ooh,
chuckle fest that was. Yeah, Jesus
yeah.
Christ. If you if you think the inevitability at the end of this is depressing, go and watch The Road. Jesus Christ, that
The
was a
funny
hard.
thing is, I find the road funny.
Yeah, I
I mean,
know.
for me, it is funny.
Only because I think that is a clunky mess. And we will get. I'm sure we're going to get comments, especially on YouTube for that one. And then we move on. That is us for season 5. We've done our post-apocalyptic season. We survived the apocalypse wastelands. Leather chaps and all. We've done it all. So we'll be letting you know soon what we're going to go on to, because we'll have an inter-season, between season kind of focus, and then we'll be back for season 6. But for now, Julian, thank you very much for joining me on the beach.
And thanks for everyone for supporting the Patreon.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for our support. We really appreciate it and trying this out. But for now, thank you very much, and we shall see you on the next episode.